Hello? Yeah, there we go. Alright, so I think we're just about to get started. We did run a bit late, but a few people just joining in. We'll just get started. So we're going to run a bit into lunch, but hopefully that'll be okay. Spend as much time as we need to. So it is time for Alfresco 3.0. When I was on stage a year ago, I announced the SDK 3.0 and said that we're developing it, it's coming, we're working on some new cool stuff, but we never really got that much work done. During the summer and the coming months, we did push out a beta, and we've done multiple betas in the fall, and about a month ago we officially released it, and we've gotten some great feedback, so that's all good. But now it is time. So, my name is Hejlskov. I am the product manager for developer platform and APIs here at Alfresco. You can get my email, my Twitter handle if you want to get in touch with me. I'm around all week, so if you have any questions, feel free just to hit me up. I'm very approachable. Love to talk to you guys. And I look after the SDKs, the REST APIs, the application development framework, just the loads of different things that have to do with developers, and I'm a developer myself, and if you go and look at the GitHub repository, there's lots and lots of commits from me, so I just can't keep my hands off it. So, I wanted to just take you through a few steps. Some of it will be a bit of repeat from last year. I wanted to do a brief history on where we are today with the SDK, how we got there, then we're going to talk about the SDK 3.0, what's the vision, what's the new features. We're going to talk a little bit about that Maven plugin, because one of the things that I said last year at my session was that you essentially have to be a Maven expert to know everything about the SDK, and that is no longer the case. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And overall, I hope that will take roughly 10 minutes, and then the rest of the time is going to be demo and Q&A, because we have lots of new cool things I want to talk to you guys about. So, brief history. All the way back in 2009, we had a community contribution where we, Gab and Maurizio, they started up this project, and we had this all-in-one, and we could start doing things in Maven. And prior to that, we had to use AMP scripts or a custom build or something completely different. So it was really revolution, especially for me when I started working on this thing, and we were like, how do we build our customizations or extensions? And there was no real good answer for it. And then we saw this Maven thing, and I was like, oh, that is the greatest thing ever. Then a few years passed by, and nothing really happened, and then we had the 1.1.1 release, which was great, and it was widely popular. We got a lot of good feedback. I got engaged with the project, started contributing to it. We had lots of contributions from a lot of people in this room, actually. And we pushed out the 2.0 release in 2014 after some time. I think we did a lot of work at a hackathon summit in Barcelona and in London to really get this release out. And it was great. We had hot reloading, we had a bunch of cool features, we introduced the share archetype, and it was just overall a good release. But there was also a lot of problems with it. So we quickly after that released a 2.1 release, because we messed up some JDK compatibility issues, and there was lots of things going on. And then we had to push out even another one, and then in 2016 we pushed out the 2.2 release. Now, the problem with how we got here is that originally when this project started out, Alfresco wasn't built with Maven. It was built with AND scripts, and it was a bit all over the place, which was good for the time it was, but it wasn't built by Maven, which meant doing an SDK and an archetypes and everything with Maven just became a bit more problematic. So what we ended up with was a complex compatibility matrix that looked like this. So if you are on 4.2, you need to use 1.1.1. If you're on 5.0, you need to use a certain version. Like the SDK, we would have to adjust the SDK version that we were using for that specific Alfresco version, and they weren't always backwards compatible, and the upgrade paths were just huge. There was so many things you had to change, and a lot of instances the recommendation would be generate a new project, start copying over your code, and then you have a new project up and running. But what if you're in, like a lot of you guys in the audience are partners or community integrators, you're building a module and you want to give that out and support multiple versions of Alfresco for different audiences and different customers? Well, you're pretty much out of luck, and you would have to maintain separate branches, because if you wanted that module to work on both 5.0, 5.01, and 5, and 5.1, and 5.1, you'd have to have 3 different versions of the SDK running, which is not that great. And again, I'm not expecting you to read any of this, but just look at the one thing I wanted you to look at. I don't think it's, you can see it on this page here. There's nothing wrong with this page. It's good to have upgrading instructions, but look at the top right corner. That's a scroll bar. It gives you an indication of how big this page is, just to upgrade from SDK 2.1.1 to 2.2. And honestly, I must admit, I'm not proud of how we ended up there, but that was the reality. And it was one of the main things that we wanted to fix and address in SDK 3.0. So, what is new in the 3.0 release? A lot of you guys probably already used it. Show of hands, how many have used the SDK 3.0 already? Fairly decent. I probably should have asked this to begin with. How many you people know what the SDK is? Okay, we're good then. So, we had these 4 pillars of overall visions and stuff we wanted to hit, like high-level targets we wanted to hit with the SDK. And I tried to compose this into some bigger chunks because I'm product manager, so it needs to be a bit more high level and fit into a roadmap and a backlog and a vision and everything. But compatibility was like the biggest thing we wanted to address. We needed to make sure that whatever we did was be compatible with all the different releases as much as we could. So a stretch goal for this was actually to work with 4.2 all the way up to 5.2. So we'll talk more about that. We wanted to align more to standards. As all of you know, we've used AMP in the past, and it's a great tool, but having to do a custom extensions with Maven, it's the whole way of source main AMP instead of source main resources. If you break things in Maven, how you structure files, then you just start asking for trouble. So we wanted to be more aligned to standards. We wanted to use jars, and again, have a slide on each of these things. So. Also, we wanted to empower developers, stuff like hot reloading, and we need to make it much more configurable. One of the common things that we kept hearing on the SDK 2.2 release and the 1.1.1, like things like you had a forced parent POM, so you couldn't use your company internal things. You didn't have any control over how the amps were built because that was all baked in and hidden away in some weird Maven mojo thing that you had no control over. So you didn't have a whole lot of options. You could do a lot of things, but the core things like change the way, affect the way the build produce these artifacts was a bit tough. So for compatibility, I'm actually quite pleased with the progress we managed to make. So SDK 3.0 will work with 4.2, 5.0, 5.1, 5.2, and I'm also working with the repository team to ensure that it will work with the next release that we come up with, whether that's a 5.3 or 6.0, that is yet to be determined. But we want to make sure that it all works. Switching the version should be very easy. No more of these huge upgrade pages. It is literally 2 things you have to change. So you need to change the platform version and the share version, and that's it. Everything else will be handled under the hood. And of course, you want to switch between community and enterprise. There's a configuration option for that. Just it's as simple as a property in your POM. In terms of upgrading the SDK, well, we've said in the past that we will follow SemWare, we will not break archetypes, we will not introduce breaking changes in minor releases, and we've just done that anyways, which I feel bad about, but that was the reality of where we're at. So we're following SemWare very strict, so we're not going to introduce any backwards incompatible changes. Like Jeff, I believe you created an issue around could we remove some of the testing code that's bundled with it. It's a very good idea. I'd love to talk more about that, but that would be essentially a breaking change, so that would have to put it in a 4.0 release. But I mean, we could speed that up, that process, and get there faster. But just to say that we want to make sure that it stays easy to upgrade, and the only thing you would have to do is change Alfresco SDK version, because now it's just pulling in a plugin, and we'll see lots of demos on that. So we wanted to align with standards. So as I announced last year, we're going to switch to jars by default. So previously we'd always build an AMP, and then if you wanted to use to produce a jar, you could do that, but it was a lot of work, and that whole integration with your IDEs, it was a bit difficult. But now we've flipped that over. So by default, when you use the SDK, it will give you a jar file. And jar files has the limitations that a jar has, so you can't override the out-of-the-box resources. You can't bring in third-party dependencies. But if you need to do that, we still fully support amps, but now it's in assembly. So inside your POM, you'll have a Maven assembly plugin. You comment that in, and now you have full control over that amp. So it will just removing the comments in the POM, and I'll show examples of that. It generates both the jar and the amp, so you have full flexibility on how that's done. And if you want to change how that amp is built, if you want to include extra resources or exclude or just move things completely around, you have complete control over that assembly XML, so you can control how it's built. No forced parent POM. I know that a lot of people have been requesting that for a long time. It also has one disadvantage, which is there's no more profiles, which I consider to be a good thing. But we did miss the purge profile. So a lot of people have been asking, how can I purge and delete my temporary database and the content store and everything? Well, you could do Maven clean -p purge, or you could do rm-rf elf data there. It's roughly the same amount of characters, but I do realize that it's something we need, so we're going to introduce a Alfresco purge goal in the plugin to fix that. So that's a thing we missed. In terms of aligning to standards, one of the things we've done is we've greatly taken the all-in-one project and it's gone on a diet. So it's much slimmer, it's much more smooth to work with. And before in all-in-one, you would have a repo amp, you would have a repo war file, a share amp, a share war file, and a runner project. Well, now you only have a platform jar module, a share module, and an integration test module. If you don't write test integration test, you can get rid of the integration test module. You can also move it inside the platform jar if you want to. You have that flexibility, but it's much cleaner and standard based. So it also means that the integration with the IDEs becomes much less painful to work with. It still worked in the past, but there was a few hiccups with some of the versions, and IntelliJ would break from time to time, and then sometimes the same version of Eclipse didn't work properly across Windows and Mac, and it was just horrible. And we've created a new run profile inside the Alfresco Maven plugin, and we'll talk more about that. So this is the biggest topic that everyone's been asking me about. So what about hot reloading? What are we doing? What's happened with Spring Loaded? And do we have to go buy JRebel? So we have two options in the 3.0 release. One is you could use a free open source product called Hejlskov Agent. I will say it does perform pretty well. The hot reloading capabilities are nice, and I'll show you them in the demo. It is, however, a bit wobbly, and so sometimes it just stops working, and for no apparent reason. But during all the testing, and I've done extensive coding sessions just to see if it breaks down, and it is, I'd say it works 90% of the time for the things that you want to do. It is quite solid, and it is a free open source project, so it comes with the limitation that there's like no support and everything, but it works quite nice. The installation process is a bit tricky because it's based on top of DCVM, which is a patch for your JRE or JDK on your computer. So you need to download the DCVM that matches the exact version of the Java version you have on your machine. So again, it is a bit wobbly, but it works really, really nicely. If you want to just completely go around all of that craziness, you can go and purchase JRebel, which works out of the box as well. And I got asked this question 5 times yesterday at the welcome party. So is it worth it? Should we go with JRebel? I want to say we don't have any affiliation with JRebel Zero Turnaround at all. Personally, from all the testing we've done, JRebel does provide a very good experience, and the support is really responsive. So if you can afford it, if you want to shed that extra $500 a year, I think it is, then it's, in my opinion, it's totally worth it, but you'll have to make that judgment call for yourself. It still has the same limitations as we've had in the past. So Hejlskov Agent doesn't reload the beans because it doesn't reload the XML files. It does reload annotated beans if they are present, whereas JRebel will actually reload those beans. So overall, the hot reloading mechanism is really solid. It works pretty well for both Java content, but also for the static content. So if you're doing shared development, it's going to work out quite nicely. So again, for empowering developers, we've also done a lot of work on integration testing. The biggest problem we've had is you want to spin up the full application, not just the context, because you want to have access to the search engine, you want to have access to the full thing so you can do a proper integration test. But if you're writing a test and you have to start the full web app and run that test and shut it down again, that's an easy 2 minutes just to get everything up and running. So we've done a lot of work to take a contribution from Bindu right here. They provided this a few years ago, and we finally managed to rework it a bit and then stick it in there. But essentially what it means is when you have your integration tests, you can run them against a already running repository. And this means that you get that instant feedback on the results. So it integrates with your IDE. If you have it running in the background, you can just right-click, say, run as JUnit, and you get instant response. And it's really, really good. And bundle that on top with hot reloading, you can just really do TDD in a timely fashion. It just gives you that nice save and refresh. Everything just hot reloads instantly. So it's really, really good. And we wanted to make it configurable. So in the 3.0 release, we have 40 different configuration parameters. Some of them, like, you want to enable Solar, you want to enable Share, you want to enable the platform, which are the share modules, the dependencies, and everything. So there's lots of things you can configure and define, like the group ID of the artifact we're running on, and just there's a whole lot of things that you can configure, and we want to do that more. But there's also a trade-off versus how far do we take it, how flexible do we make it versus the supportability. So we're trying to weigh all of that. And as I said, AMPs are still supported as an assembly. So about that Maven plugin. Previously, when we did all the running and all the testing, everything was built in profiles, and that meant that we had to have a forced parent POM, which was huge, and we had to do all of this XML, and it wasn't really flexible. So the thing we wanted to do with providing support for 4.2 all the way up to 5.2, we had a lot of issues because the artifacts changed, the packaging changed, the configuration changed. So, for example, with 4.2, you have to use Solar 1.4, and it has a different packaging. It has a different group ID and artifact ID. It has in 5.0, and doing all of this in XML is just not sustainable. So it's not flexible enough to do that. So we wanted to move all of that logic into the plugin, and I get a lot of questions on, well, now we've created this monolithic plugin that does everything. Well, when you look at it, the only thing that the plugin does is it will run an embedded Tomcat with an H2 database with your customizations loaded up and the full stack of Alfresco. And that's it. It'll also help you do integration testing. Those are the two things we do. We don't actually impact the build. It doesn't affect how we're building the artifacts, how we're producing the amps. That's all done by standard Maven. So if you don't need to run an embedded version, you want to deploy that directly into a local install or something, you actually don't need the plugin. You could just have all the dependencies and use Maven as standard, but it's a tool that really helps you move along the development. So I wanted just to take you through a little bit of the craziness that happens under the hood, because that makes it so much easier to really get an idea of what happens. So, as I said, it does all the running and the testing. It installs external amps and your local amps. It starts the repository, Solar, Share, Alfresco API Explorer. It can be configured, everything, and the only thing you have to do is like Maven install, Alfresco run, and that's it. So what happens when you actually do this? Well, there's another slide that just like this. Oh, those colors are just not working out well on the projector. So the first thing it does is it checks is Solar enabled. If yes, no, then we unpack the config, we do some replacements, some placeholders in there. Then we will move on, check is the platform enabled, so platform being the repository. So we unpack the WAR file, we install the amps, we install the jar modules. We may be doing some things on the web XML in terms of secure commons, SSL. Then we do some licensing, we copy over some global properties, we package it all up again, and then we move on to the next thing, which is we take the share WAR file and we do the same thing, like unpack it, install the amps, copy over some configuration, like if you have some custom log4j, share config custom, all these things, wrap it all up again, and then we're good. So then we start Tomcat, we add in some dependencies, some DB drivers. Like one of the things a lot of people want to do is they want to use it with an external database, it's Postgres, MySQL, but now we have configuration parameters to do that. So if you just say enable MySQL, well, it will have sensible defaults to a MySQL database that you can use easily. So that's all taken care of. It adds in the web apps, it sets up the paths and the properties, checks if it needs to fork the process, configure the ports, and then it starts it up. And that is the flow. And don't expect you to get all of this, but if you ever want a reference on what it's actually doing, then this is a good reference for it. And you'll see a lot of this in the log when you start it up. When you do Maven install Alfresco run, it has a lot of debug output, and I've kept it in there, we've kept it in there on purpose. Because whenever people have an issue with the SDK, they report a bug file and an issue on GitHub, having all of that output really helps us see and identify what are the issues, where did it go wrong, is it using the right artifacts, using the right versions, how did you configure it. So there's a lot of output from it, but it's really good. I'm not sure if this is readable on the projector, but there's a sample from a POM file where you can see the configurations. It's probably not that well. So let's try and dive into some demos. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay. Is that readable in the back? Easy way to do this. Nope.
There's a presentation mode, but then it's going to get really big.
Yeah. I should have checked this before. Editor, fonts.
Try to page zoom. Did page zoom when you're in the app?
Sorry?
Did you page zoom when you're in the
That works. Good idea. Alright, so here I'm not going to go over the generation process. That hasn't changed. So you do Maven archetype, generates, filter, org, Alfresco, and whatnot, and you get the 3.0 release. One of the things some people will be a bit confused about is that you'll still see the Alfresco AMP, share AMP, all in one platform jar and shared jar. And that's because everything is deployed on Maven Central, and it goes on the group ID, and the older artifacts or the older archetypes are still available, so you can still select the Alfresco AMP archetype, but it's only available in the 2.2 release. So you need to go with the platform jar, the shared jar, or all in one. They will be available in the 3.0 release. I wanted to create a Maven command that would filter it by the version, which it supports, but there's a bug in Maven, so that doesn't work. Too bad. So just wanted to give you a quick tour of an all-in-one project. So I've created this standard all-in-one project called all-in-one, and as I mentioned, we have an all-in-one platform, and again, this is a jar file. So source main, assembly, jar, resources. So here we have like all the things we expect in a jar format, and we can even do like static resources, which will be available on directly to the browsers. We can have all our web scripts in here, and it comes with a bunch of test code in there. And by default, we also have like demo component and a web script. We also have the assembly, so if you want to go in and customize how the AMP is built, you have that assembly at your disposal, so you can completely change that up. And that's pretty much all there is to say around. We also have some tests in there, unit tests, and we'll see that in a bit. And the shared jar is exactly the same. Like it has an assembly, it has some Java classes, it has some resources with static resources, web extensions, everything you would expect in a share module. So if we look at the POM file, it will look a little bit big at first, but again, you'll notice that there's no parent POM. We have a lot of properties. We have some comments in here to guide you, like where's solo home, what's the group ID, what's the version we want to run with, is this community edition, is it the enterprise edition, some more versions, and then it's just dependencies, usual Maven stuff, nothing too fancy about it. And then when we get to the build section, we can see here we have a nice big comment around. If you want to build AMPs, you just need to remove these comments, and then we'll build the amp as well. It will include your dependencies and everything, so that's it's quite nice. Another thing we've had in the past, and this is, I did an analysis on the GitHub issues we've had, and roughly 9% of all the issues we had were related to these non-filtered file extensions. And essentially what Maven does is does resource filtering, so it will do property replacements on the files you have in your project. And usually it's like dollar bracket, some property, and it will replace that. But if you have binaries inside your project, like a PDF file or even an image, PowerPoint, whatever, zip file, then you could end up having the resource plugin give a compilation error because it tries to do a replacement on a binary file that doesn't work. So instead of having, and because this was all hidden away inside a profile somewhere in the parent POM, overriding this wasn't always obvious, so we just brought it in directly into a POM and gave you control over it. So if you're getting an error saying that can't resolve resource mark something, then it's because you have this, and you can now have full control over it. And then we get to the actual fun stuff. So the Maven plugin, we depend on the Alfresco Maven plugin. We have the version set. We want to say by default we enable H2. We enabled Solar, we enabled Share, and we enabled the API Explorer. So if I wanted to create a hybrid mix of this thing, I still want all-in-one, but I really don't care about Share, or you want to do it the other way around, you want to have a multi-module project, you can just start changing this up and say, well, enable Share, false, we don't want that, or enable Solar, false, or the platform, depending on what kind of thing you're doing. And then for installing dependencies, so we have platform modules and share modules. And this is where you define your dependencies. So if you're bringing in external AMP files, then you need to go in and you need to go into the platform modules, and you'll define your AMPs, you'll define your jars, and that is the way it gets installed. So essentially, if one of the things I get asked a lot, and just recently published a blog post about this, what if I wanted to bring in a JavaScript console? Well, that is dead easy. You just need to add in a dependency, because Florian did publish JavaScript console to Maven Central. So adding in a dependency, I can't remember on top of my head, but it's in that blog post. You add in a dependency on the repo and the platform modules and in the share modules, restart, and then that AMP will be downloaded, installed, and everything is taken care of. So it's really, really solid in terms of defining all of this. And similar, if we go look at the platform jar, and it will be the same thing for the share jar. Again, this will be the exact same setup as we have in the all-in-one, except now it's just a single module that only launches the things that you need. So if you go look at the plugin configuration, find it. There we go. So here's a platform jar where it's just enabling H2, enable platform, enable Solar, and we don't enable share. So this is one of the big things that we've had of issues in the previous SDK versions, where you wanted to use the platform or the repo AMP project, but you couldn't use Solar, so you had to do like a hack, and there was a profile that I accidentally did like 5 years ago that's still circling around in the community. Now it's just this one property you change, and that's it. So enough talk. Let's try and launch this thing. So right here I have the magic command that enables the hotspot agent. Let's make this a bit bigger. So essentially, once you have everything installed, you need to pass in some parameters, and we have some documentation and tutorials coming up around how you configure all of this. But again, Maven install Fresco run, and we just need to leave that in the background for a few minutes. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of output coming up, like which amps it's installing, is doing anything with licensing and everything. Now, as I mentioned, hotspot agent, it is a bit wobbly, and because it is like that, we've enabled a debug log from hotspot agent. So when you enable it, you will get a lot of output, and that can be annoying. You can turn it off. This hotspot agent properties file inside your project. You can turn on and off, but it just gives a lot of output, and if it's not working, it's great to be able to just go into the console and see, did it actually reload the class that I just compiled, or didn't it? So that is a good feature. Now, along with all of this, I'm just going to take a share and start that up as well and leave that in the background. So we have a repo running almost. I think we're just about there now. There we go. All right, so this is the, oh, that is small. This is the default web script that we provide with both all-in-one and a platform DR, and it actually contains both some JavaScript code and some Java code. So let's try and hit that up. It is in the Hello World web scripts. So we're just going to try and change this thing up. All right, and if everything goes well, we're going to build. Project. Just to give you a flavor of the debug, I'm just trying to do it again so you can see. So we rebuild it, force rebuild it, so it triggers. You can see it does a lot of output, but the main thing here is we can actually see that it flushed the Hello World web script, which means we had a successful hot reload. So now I've changed the class, it's all good. And just to show, because this can be done if you turn it on in debug mode, but you wouldn't be able to do stuff like text. I'm just going to create a new method and say text, build it, check that it hot reloaded, it did. And we get a hello world. So we've introduced a new method. I can change it. We can even change the signature of it. So let's say it takes a parameter, string x, and we're just going to return x. Going to build it. And it didn't reload. As I said, it is a bit wobbly from time to time. So I'm going to say recompile. There we go. Hello from parameters. So that's great. Cool. That works. So we have some good hot reloading in terms of the Java class. Let's try and have a look at the share. So. And this was one of the things that actually took us by surprise, because we knew that we wanted to provide some hot reloading for share extensions, and especially if we're doing iCow, it can be a bit painful. And in the past, it's been a challenge getting some decent hot reloading up and running. And now I'm just hoping that the demo will work, because I've tested this so much last night and the whole weekend. But we have the sample page that's bundled out of the box, and if we go in and find the code, need to open the project. So the thing that took us most by surprise is we didn't actually do anything special for the hot reloading and share to work. It turned out that the hotspot agent actually did all of this out of the box. We didn't have to do any special configurations or anything. So we have this template widget here, and let's just find the terminal, so let's see if it actually does it. All right, moment of truth. So you can see in the debug that it did trigger some updates on it, and let's see if it comes out with an alert. Please. It did. And for people who've done extensive share customizations, getting to that point has been painful in the past. Just saying. So we should actually now be able to just go in and change things completely. So we can do hello in a template. Just reload. Hopefully. Too quick. Yeah, we have hello in a template. So very nice hot reloading in both share and the platform. So next thing I want to show is, I just want to stop, because right now I had a platform jar running and a share jar running. So I want to launch up a all-in-one and show a little bit of the integration testing and how that all works. Oh, that's a lot of processes. So this is going to take just a minute to get up and running, but again, with all-in-one, we have both the, out of the box, we have the share jar, we have the platform jar, and we have the integration test modules. So I just wanted to show an example of how well that works. So in the integration testing, we in the module, we have a few tests in there bundled by default. So we have a custom, we have like a model test that will actually do some things. We have the demo component test, which is the one I'm going to demo. So just try and make it a bit bigger so you can actually see what it's doing. So we have this notion of a remote unit test, and I need to scroll a little bit. So this line here is essentially where we define, here's where we have Alfresco running, repository running. And then we can just define our tests, and now we can grab like the context. We can grab the context files, we can grab the services, we can start just interacting with everything, like we can get a service registry, a node service, we can start getting properties, we can do searches. And because this runs on a full stack of the whole platform, so both the platform, share and Solar and everything, we can do searches, we can test everything. So it's running on a full, nice, good stack. And again, as I mentioned, the way this works is if you already have an instance running, it will just detect that and it will run it on that running instance. And if it's not, well, if it's not running and you're executing it from your IDE, you'll get a failure because then it doesn't know how to start it. But if you do Maven clean install from the command line, it will actually do the whole thing. So that will start up the whole repository. It will run the tests and then shut everything down again, which is really nice for continuous integrations. But for this this thing to really work, you just need to have it running in the background, like I have here. I just used the run bash script, and let's try and run the test and see if the demo gods are with me today. Treating me well so far. So we just executed integration tests, and this is something that if you did this in the past, where you had to do a full context start and stop, this would have taken 2.5 minutes, depending on your machine and how much code you had in there, and now it just comes instantly. So this is a very, very good hot reloading for that test. We have another test here. We just run it, and we get this. So now the big challenge comes, and this is my stretch goal for today. I want to try and make this test fail, just to prove that the hot reloading kicks in, it reloads the classes, and it's actually executing the change class in it. I didn't test this, so let's see. So we assert that we normally would have 7 elements in company home by default, and now we say we should have 10. I'm just going to go in and say compile, and hopefully it picked it up.
Did you run with the nations?
I did not. That is a very good. Okay, so I need to restart it. Sorry about that. So while this is starting up again, I want to thank Bindu for actually doing this contribution, because most of this testing infrastructure came from you. We reworked it a bit, and that pull request has just been sitting there since Summit 2014. Yeah. All right. So yeah, it just needs to start up. Take a minute. Any questions so far?
What about Spring context reloading, for example, by adding new beam? Is that also reloaded? Or?
So the question is if adding new beans is supported or not. If you're using JRebel, it is. If you're using Hejlskov agent, it is not. If you're doing beans that are annotated, it should work with Hejlskov agents, but I haven't tested it. And we don't have a whole lot of annotated beans in the repo, so that's one limitation that we have. I have been in contact with the maintainers of Hejlskov agents to ask them, is this a big thing? And Bindu, I believe you did this as well. Just ping them and say, hey, if we wanted to add in reloading beans from the context, but it needs to be read from the XML file, is that a big or a small thing? And he said that, well, they already do support the bean reloading, but only through annotations. So we need to produce like a plugin that will scan the XML files. It'll be a couple of days worth of work. And then I asked him, well, can we like sponsor you to do that? Because I'd love to see that feature, and he never got back to me. So I need to try and chase him down a little bit more. Otherwise, it would be a great topic for an upcoming hackathon. But it's complex stuff to deal with these things.
If everybody in this room were to go onto their Gitter channel and ask for that feature, it would probably happen.
That would help a lot. If you all just go to the Hejlskov agent Gitter channel and ask for that feature, then definitely that would be awesome. All right, so now we have the hot reading rotor going. So that was the wrong test. So now, just to prove that I'm not lying, so this test should fail. It did fail because we said that we expected 10, but we actually got 7. So we can see expected 10, and we actually got 7. So why don't we try and, again, I didn't prepare this, recompile it. Need to check it reloaded it. It did reload it. Rerun the test. Yes! So overall, this whole TDD is just gonna launch you into creating tests faster. It's extremely good time to value that you get that instant result. It plays nicely in with your CI environment. It plays well with all the editors. We've tested this on Mac, on Windows, on Linux. We tested it with IntelliJ, both the latest and the one from last year. We've tested it with Eclipse. I've even tested NetBeans, but I don't think anyone in this room uses NetBeans. I don't think anyone uses NetBeans anymore, but just to prove a point, I did test that it works, and it's rock solid. So it's quite nice. And that's pretty much the demo I wanted to show you guys, and I have like 5 minutes left, so I think we can start taking some questions. Questions for you.
Anyone have a question?
I will shout.
Oh, it's for recording and for the whole room to hear.
Thanks. So, hi Ola.
Hey.
And my question is related to Solar 6. So will it be included somehow in SDK or?
So I worked with Gavin on this yesterday, and I'm happy to say that these are my notes on all the things we need to do to get Solar 6 up and running. We did a proof of concept. It does work, and getting all of this in should be in the 3.02 release time frame. So we're planning a 3.01 release in a couple of weeks, hopefully next week, with some bug fixes that we've got from all of you guys, which is great. And I will put this in for the next release after that, because it was quite simple to do. And again, the only thing you would have to do is as a property enable search services, which would be its queue to kick off Solar 6. It was a bit tricky because Solar 6 is no longer a web app, so we had to like grab a zip file with a binary and executable and launch that up in the background. But it turned out it was way easier than we thought. So definitely that's something that we're bringing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Another question about this purge profile, or previously there was purge.
Yeah.
If I use Postgres or MySQL, will it work? This purge for that? Or
So that's an open question. Like I need to go in and actually create a feature enhancement and just to get some feedback on what we want to do in there. I'm not a big believer of having something that goes in and start trashing around in people's databases. Let's discuss that. I'll say let's create an issue and to get a discussion going on it, because it's something that's valuable. But I am reluctant that someone's going to point it at their production environment and do a purge. And I've seen it happen before.
The old purge did not support that, so
Yeah,
there's precedent for not supporting that.
exactly. So, but anyways, I'm open to having a discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No question? Over there? Okay. Can you just pass the mic down? Thanks.
What's the upgrade path from the beta? Is it just a matter of changing the version, or is there more to it than that?
I think there's a. You need to copy in the Hejlskov agent file, the properties file, for that to work. If you need that, I'd have to go and check. But it should be upgrading. Yeah, well, there's a couple of properties. We need to provide some guidance on it. It shouldn't be hard, but we did change a few things from the last beta in December to the release we had about a month ago. So,
Thank you. Everyone, give it a hand for Ole.
thank you.